Hi, and welcome to this installment of Frank and Mary here on Nantucket. If you haven't seen this show before, my name is Art Bergeron. My day job is as an elder law attorney at Myrick O'Connell. But as folks know, this is not about my day job. This is about my friends Frank and Mary. If you've been to the Salt Marsh and see one of my presentations, you know that I always talk about Frank and Mary, whose goal in life is to live in their house until they die and be buried in the backyard. And if you identify with that, and in this case, you want to be buried on island, you don't want to go off. The question is, who are the people you need to know and what are the programs you need to know about in order to do just that? And I know, and my friend Allison Forsgren has been my co-host for like ever. We've been doing this like 3 or 4 years now, I think. It's a long time.
Some time.
And Allison always finds these great guests. And actually, we have a return guest. You know, it was by popular acclaim. We had her on last year, but so Allison's going to introduce her so we can talk about, because one of the ways the show has changed over time is we've tried to focus now not just on issues that only affect seniors, but really issues that affect everybody, of which you folks are, as seniors, are a big part, you know. And certainly a big piece of that is town meeting and taxes and and programs and stuff. So Allison, whom do we have today? In the middle of that huge library. There's a big library behind her.
She's read every book too, I'm sure.
That's great.
This is our venerable town moderator, Sarah Alger. She's been on the show before and in front of the town meeting show for many, many, many years now. Although I can remember when Wayne Holmes did it in the gymnasium of what is now the middle school, right?
That's right.
I was there for a couple of those, but Sarah is going to be presiding over town meeting. It's going to be Monday. It starts Monday, May 2nd at 5 p.m. in the high school auditorium, the Mary Walker Auditorium. So Sarah, thank you so much. You weren't on the hot seat here. We just would love to hear your take on some of the things and what we might expect.
And usually I start off by saying, so how did you get to the island, which I asked you last year, but I'm instead just going to talk about the watching you in action last year, because I actually went to town meeting just because I was just dying to see the play out on the whole controversy with the housing piece, you know. And it was just amazing to watch the running of a 900-person meeting in outdoor. It was just astonishing. So I just have to say it was just great. It was a masterful work. And I have great respect for town meeting moderators, because town meeting is the essence of the government. I mean, town meeting, they can do whatever they want, kind of, right? That's the point. Is that, you know, legislature, the court cases have always been very, very deferential to what happens at town meeting, because they say, hey, everybody's there, right?
Right.
Which means it can be total chaos unless there's a great moderator. So it was just great watching. So anyway, that's my brief take on this.
You saw one of the most unusual town meetings we'll probably ever have on Nantucket. I don't know that we'll ever do it outside again. So you saw something that's probably once in a lifetime. I really enjoyed it. Although I have to say, like most spring days on Nantucket, it started out foggy, became quite beautiful, and then by the end of the afternoon, it was freezing cold.
Right.
And I was very happy to get back inside. But it was a great day. It was really fun. It was great to see people coming and going in and out of the tent. This year, we'll be back in the auditorium and kind of more business as usual. It will be at night. And we will have the electronic voting, which I'm very happy about. We're having the people who did the sound at last year's town meeting come back. They did a terrific job, and sound is obviously important. We're setting up some overflow sites, but the hope is that we can get all the voters into the auditorium.
Wow, so you think there might be overflow?
It's possible, because we can only fit, you know, using that, I think they call it the AR, which I don't know what that stands for.
Activities room, I think.
Yeah, that room off to the right where they roll back the wall.
It's to your right, it's to our left.
Oh yeah, my right, your left. Stage right, I think that is. Anyway, if we use that, maybe we get 1,000 people, something like that. So if we got anything over that, we'd have to go overflow. And if we have a lot of non-voters, we're thinking that they would have to probably be in the gym.
And so there'll be a simulcast in the gym?
Yeah, we'll have audio and visual at the same time, yes. And I'll have an alternate moderator in there. We're going to try to have all the speaking done from the main auditorium. So, my advice is if you're attending, and I hope that you are, come early and grab your seat.
Yes. So there'll be no mask man. I mean, are they suggesting wearing masks if you're in the audience, or?
Masks are still encouraged everywhere. So yes, we'll be encouraging masks, but we're not going to, at this point, I don't think we're mandating that. If the health department comes back and tells us something different, we'll obviously follow their lead, but that's where we are at the moment.
So what do you think are going to be the most riveting of the discussions to be held?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what's gotten probably the most airtime so far are articles 42 and 43, which are the short-term rental articles. 42 being brought forward by the planning board and 43 being brought forward by Act Now. I worry that because those articles have taken so much of the focus, that there are other important issues that may be being overlooked, that may slip by, or, there's always a surprise at the meeting. I never know what it's going to be, but there's always that one article that we haven't anticipated that becomes highly controversial. I'm not sure what it will be this year. The gender equality article, which has been filed by a citizen, has gotten a fair amount of press, and maybe will draw some attention. I know people feel strongly about it on both sides of the issue. Article 11, which deals with our island home and funding for a new building, I think will probably generate quite a bit of discussion. I know people feel very strongly about our island home and its current location, so that's always a topic of conversation. The
one thing that's sort of important to note about the our island home situation is that the location is really no longer part of the conversation.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of the questions I've received from people are, I thought it was going to be at East Creek Road, and people need to realize that that decision has been made and that it's really going to be about the facility, having a nursing facility. So,
right. I'm not sure everyone has come to terms with that.
Right. I know, but isn't it water under the bridge at this point? The selectmen made a decision in August.
Yeah.
And I don't see a way to really change that and still have a nursing home at this point.
I guess I think that's probably part of the discussion we'll be having.
Yep.
We are unusual in terms of community in that we still have such a facility.
Yeah.
I think
whenever I tell folks on the mainland, I always, I talk about that nursing home all the time, because I always say that it is viewed as, some folks view, oh, it's just the past. This is so the past. But really, from my perspective, it's so the future. The notion of a relatively small and locally controlled, whether that's by a town or by like a nonprofit nursing home, is to me it's just the future. So I think it's great that that folks are just still believing in that, because I think it's really important, right?
And investing the money.
It's a huge investment, right?
On an annual basis, and it's a conscious decision, I think, that's been made.
So what kind of potential amendments could be made on the floor that would change the way people should be looking at the article?
I remember last year you you actually, if you were going to make an amendment, you had to bring paper copies with you? If it seemed.
Yes. Well, ideally, if you're going to there are a couple of things. If you're going to be bringing forward an article that has not received a positive recommendation from the Finance Committee, or if you want to bring forward an amendment to an article that did receive a positive recommendation, we really urge you to bring us those documents ahead of time so that we can look at them, make sure they're within the scope of the article, make sure that they work legally, get them into our system so they can be projected. We will have projection again this year, which is great. Mary and Alnavissima will be back. We weren't able to do that out in the tent. And I mean, we got along okay without it, but I think it really does add a lot to the meeting to be able to project what people are looking at and voting on.
Yeah.
Particularly when it comes to amendments and motions that people have not had an opportunity to see in advance. So yes, ideally, you can email them to me. It doesn't have to be a physical paper copy. But if you're coming to the meeting with it, then it really does have to be a paper copy and something that I can share with town council.
And it's probably really helpful for everybody to get that well in advance. I mean, is there a deadline, or have you received any yet?
No, I've heard that people are working on them, but I don't think I've seen anything final yet. I did see a couple of proposed amendments that didn't work within the scope of the article, so those are back to the drawing board. I know that Matt Fee is working very hard to kind of bring people together on a proposed amendment to Article 43. I haven't seen that yet. I suspect I'll be getting positive motions on the I forget what they're called, the spa article, the water feature article in the Old Historic District, which we didn't mention earlier, but I suspect may generate quite a bit of conversation.
Because that did not get a favorable vote from the planning board, correct?
It didn't, but I think it's possible that the sponsor or someone else will bring a positive motion, and we'll have a discussion on those articles.
Now, are there any big budget numbers or items this year?
There was an article that proposes to change the makeup of the NP and EDC, the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission, and how those members are chosen. That did not get a positive recommendation, but again, I think it's possible that those will be brought forward by a voter.
But you just don't know till it begins, right?
Don't know until we get to the beginning and we really talk about it. We call the articles and figure out what we're talking about. There are a lot of construction projects on the warrant that, in addition to the design of our island home, there's a sidewalk paving and reconstruction project on Pleasant Street, repairs to the Loran Barracks, school athletic facilities.
Oh, yeah.
All kinds of things, construction of town employee housing. And
Yeah, those are all big ticket items.
Yeah, exactly. So
now I remember, Sarah, that last year, I know one of the, and I remember hearing the kind of debate over the issue was this question of kind of who's on first. And I know that you went through the articles first to just, to get through what ended up being a huge number that everybody said fine,
right.
And then kind of for the remaining ones, the question was kind of who starts. And I'm sure that folks have an interest in that, especially if you're a senior and this is now an evening meeting, right?
Right.
And you don't want to be embarrassed and fall asleep during the meeting, so you're trying to figure out, so do you want, so I guess, do you have a sense of kind of, or is that really something that really just happens at the meeting of where the big ones are going to be,
Well,
of timing?
ordinarily, it's something that happens right at the meeting. And if it can be done by motion, a motion to take something out of order, and we're governed by town meeting time. That's how our town meeting is run. And in town meeting time, it says that a motion to take something out of order ordinarily takes just a simple majority vote. But if the moderator sees that the purpose behind the motion is kind of a jockeying for position, then it can require a 2/3 vote.
Oh,
And I have required a 2/3 vote in the past. Last year, there were, and now I've forgotten what the details were, but there were specific reasons why it made sense to take those articles out of order, and it didn't have anything to do with doing it when the most people were there. It was the way the articles interrelated with the rest of the warrants and other articles that now was kind of lost to me, but
It was a good reason at the time.
yeah, it was a good reason at the time. And I knew that was going to happen, and we took a vote and we did it by majority, and it was taken out of order. Now, something like that could happen again.
right.
It's really, people get mad at me when stuff like that happens, but if I'm doing my job right, it doesn't really have anything to do with me, because it's up totally in the hands of the voters. If you don't want something to be taken out of order, and a majority of the people, or in the case of jockeying for position, 2/3 of the people don't want it taken out of order, then they'll vote and they won't take it out of order. Completely, all I'm doing is facilitating the vote,
That's a pretty big volunteer responsibility, huh?
I guess.
I mean, how much time does it take you to prepare for, I mean, like you have to wait till the end because things are in flux.
I do a fair amount of preparation. I used to do a ton more, but as I've kind of grown into the job, I've realized that not everything I was doing was strictly necessary. So I've cut back a little bit, but I obviously read the articles. I try to talk to as many people in the town as I can about, what's behind the articles, anything I need to know about them, any changes. I usually have a meeting with, say, the finance director, sometimes the finance committee, town manager, planning director, and kind of go through the warrant, and they can tell me, this is a non-issue. This is why this isn't going forward. This is the person that we'd like to address questions if they come up. And then citizens contact me as well. And I know this year Bruce Mandel has been in contact with me. He's not going forward with his 2 articles because he's not going to be able to attend the meeting. Those deal with, I think, single-use plastics.
Yep.
It's possible that someone else will decide to bring those articles forward. I've had some contact with some other article sponsors, and usually as we get really close to the meeting, I'll start getting motions and questions and things like that. So it gets a little labor intensive, and the next 2 weeks will be the most difficult. Then there's the day, probably 2 days of the meeting, and Monday, I'll probably spend the entire day preparing and going over and making sure that the room is set up right, and do a sound check and get all my stuff kind of organized, and then do the meeting, which always is late on Monday. And then Tuesday is just kind of the mad scramble to get everything ready that we learned about on Monday. So I'd say that's day 2 is probably the most difficult, because you kind of start the day a little bit tired anyway. and then it's an intense day, and then the meeting at night. So that's a long day.
Right. You know, that's why the overtime pay that you get is so significant, you know.
Yeah, I know. I think it's $175 a year, whether I earn it or not.
That's great.
Yeah,
It's a fixed fee.
Yeah.
It's a fixed fee deal. Doesn't make a difference how many warrant, you don't get paid by the warrant article. It's nothing like that.
no,
And then,
It's a
No.
and then
labor of love.
it is a labor of love. That is definitely the case. But,
Yep.
and I think at this point, I've been doing this, I don't know, 25 years or so. I think I have like accumulated, you're going to be stunned. And maybe you can give me some advice on how I should handle this. Like $325 in the OBRA, which is the retirement account.
Wow.
If I should take it all when I get to that age, should I take it all in a lump sum? Or,
yeah, or extend it over your lifetime. So you can
Yeah.
keep the taxes down on it. Boy, yeah,
exactly.
that's a tremendous sum. That's just
Yeah.
it's like a princely sum.
It is unbelievable.
42 and 43 sadly follow each other. So I think there's some confusion there, trying to remember which one is the one that because they're pretty polar opposites when it
That's
comes
right.
to what they're asking about. Excuse me, but what are some ways people can plant in their minds, park their thoughts
That's a
according
good,
to those two articles?
that's a good question. And I think 39, even though it's not a zoning article, it's related because that is the short-term rental regulations. And I assume that we'll be discussing 39, 40, 41, no, not 41, and 39, 42, 43. And I'm going to be kind of liberal in terms of the discussion in that, ordinarily when we're talking about one article, I don't let people talk about another article. I try to keep them on point. But I think in this case, when we're talking about 39 or 42, it's going to be very difficult not to also talk about 43. So I'm going to give people quite a bit of leeway there. The only thing I'm going to ask is that if you have something to say and you say it when we're discussing article, say 41, that you not also say it again when we talk about article 42 and article 43.
Right.
Was there a strategy about getting your article in, or how did they end up right back to back?
I think that's how, the select board puts together the warrant.
Oh,
And so they order the articles, and there's kind of a formula to it. I mean, the first 12, I think, articles are always the same.
I just didn't know whether it was a first come, first serve basis and they both just backed in at the same time. I thought,
No. And then all the real estate stuff comes at the very end.
yeah.
Right. Well, this has been, I've enjoyed this, Sarah. I'm sorry that this year I'm not going. I went last year and I just assumed that I'd be going back this year because I assumed that you always did them outdoors, right? Or that it was a weekend, right?
I know.
But I find it's a work day. I've got a day job. I have to,
I know. I'm sorry.
And as I said to Allison, it's always interesting to me because, of course, when you're on everybody lives where they live, and when you're on the island, all these issues make a lot of sense unless you're not from the island. And you're like, wow, that's really weird. This was the sauna one. This year's most kind of unusual, right? One was the sauna. So
The water feature.
I really enjoy this, but Allison, and I really appreciate you getting Sarah to come back on because I think this is really important. I'm sorry
about the weekday. We often have it on a weekend, but more often I think during the week. This is the first time that I can think of where we've started in May. We used to always be closer to the beginning of April.
Right.
Last year being in June was a complete anomaly. We just waited as long as we possibly could, but we had to do it before July 1st. So you got us on the weirdest year ever.
And it was very special. I came away going, that was special. That was a
It
lot of
was
fun.
special.
Well, I mean, the whole form of government is really special. And I think people on Nantucket don't realize the power of what they think and can say when it comes to real policy. And, you know, it's a good thing and a bad thing in
Right.
certain ways, but
the fact that there could be 900 people in one place being relatively polite was quite amazing.
Yes.
And which is a tribute to the folks on Nantucket, but also a tribute to the moderator.
Oh, well, thank you.
Who keeps it light and keeps people moving. So, Sarah, thanks a million for doing this. Allison, as usual, thanks for getting these great guests. I usually get to find like one guest a year. Allison finds everybody else. So
you can find more.
Well, I'm looking. Thank you very much for doing this. And folks, you know, you ought to go and participate. This is the one time a year, as we talked about, everything gets decided at town meeting. If you can't be there, you got no excuses for complaining. So thank you very much, all of you. And folks, thank you for watching. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next installment of Frank and Mary here on Nantucket. Thank you very much.